And we're back.
The instant the cameras turn on. Hey, what's going on? How have you been?
Let me tell you something.
The cameras turn off. That's not what we're doing. That's not how this goes.
So, Greg, I was thinking about something.
What were you thinking about?
Somebody asked me a question the other day and said, Rabbi,
Yeah? Yeah?
do I have any control in my life, or does God control everything in my life? Meaning, are things destined to be the way they're meant to be, or do I, as a human being, play any part in what my life is going to look like?
That's interesting. I think I whenever I think about this idea, the idea of destiny versus free will, all of that stuff, I always think about this book. Have you ever read Slaughterhouse-5 by
Never.
Kurt Vonnegut Jr.?
No.
Slaughterhouse-5.
Never.
It's never.
Never.
So I think we read it in middle school or high school. It's a really great book.
I didn't read much in middle school or high school.
I don't read. If you ask me what was the last novel you read?
Probably sometime in high school.
Right. I just don't. But
Fahrenheit 451, To Kill a Mockingbird.
Great book. But I still read a lot, just not novels.
Just
I
not
think
novels.
that's the thing.
The
is
classics.
Yeah, exactly. But in Slaughterhouse-5, there, it's a very like satirical kind of crazy sort of book. But one of the things is there's these aliens called Tralfamadorians or something like that, and they believe that time exists on a linear plane where nothing is before or after anything, that everything kind of is, and it's just a matter of where you are on that plane at any given time. So they kind of draw this comparison, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they think that it's predestined. It's that
I am born, I come into this world, is my 120 years that I'm on this planet.
120.
Us Jews believe.
I would love.
Halavai. Are my 120 years predestined? Am I, at age 44, this is where I'm meant to be. At age 65, I'm meant to be here. At age 80, I'm meant to be here. Is that all set in stone? Or do I, Rabbi Mordechai Teller, have any kind of buy-in on what's going to happen on my day-to-day life? And can I change that? And that's my question.
I think it all exists, and it all already happened at one point, and it doesn't mean that you're just going to follow whatever it is that you're going to do to get that. I think your actions and your choices on a day-to-day get you to whatever that is. But in some ways, I think of it like this. A lot of times when people talk about manifestation, you familiar with the concept?
It's the buzzword.
Manifestation. To manifest the $1 million that you want out of life.
It's the buzzword.
It is the buzzword.
In 2025.
Manifest your life. I think that
which really means to bring something into your day-to-day life, and you have an ability to create something.
Right. And so if you think of yourself, let's say, in my life, I would love to have, a really great job. I think about myself, I imagine myself having that great job. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is how I would feel if I had that great job. If I just believed that I'm going to do everything possible to get that job, even though I don't have that job now, right now, I could still have those same feelings that I would feel if I already had the job. I can just behave now the way I would behave in whatever time in the future when I already have that job.
Okay.
I guess what I'm trying to describe is this idea that whatever it is you want out of life, you can just believe that you will achieve it, that you already have it, and treat yourself with the warmth and kindness of someone who has already achieved it, and spend your time achieving that thing. Which is kind of all of that to say about destiny and about your actions. Your actions dictate your destiny.
Okay.
That's kind of what I was getting to.
Amazing. If I may add
Please.
to what you're saying.
No, this is really a closed
Show and teller.
This is
everybody.
a closed
Show and
loop
teller.
theory. There's no addition.
We believe in Judaism that God, because we've been talking about God in these episodes.
Who?
G-D.
Oh, that guy.
Okay. Gad.
Good.
We believe that God is beyond time, is beyond space,
Right.
and is standing above all of us, where in our world,
Seeing the full picture.
seeing the full picture as it is, where in our world, everything happens linearly.
We have to get to
We have
something.
to experience time second by second. And if God is beyond time and space, God will know from the beginning of time till the end of time of everything that is going to happen, or everything that has already happened.
All of the choices we've made.
However, us, Rabbi Mordechai Teller, Greg Berman, go through every second of our day creating choices, making decisions that affect what's going to happen the next second, the next second, the next second. And when I make that choice, I'm creating my own reality
Right.
every second. So if I decided to touch this, I'm using my free will right now to choose at this moment to touch it.
Right.
God knew that I was going to do this, but I am choosing to do this right now. And therefore it will have an effect on
The next moment
next
and
moment.
the moment after that.
correct. Now, that is how we understand on a very simple level. God is beyond time and space, and I, as man, create every second as it happens through my own free will decision. Now, I'm going to take another question. If I were to ask you, Greg, here is vanilla ice cream and chocolate ice cream. I want you to choose what ice cream you want. Do you choose vanilla or chocolate?
Both. In
choose
the
both.
same plate.
In the same plate.
Mixed.
Okay.
I'm a swirl kind of fella.
Did you use, according to Judaism, a real free will decision in choosing
Sure.
your
This almost feels like a magic trick where God's like, pick a card. Now, this is a completely normal deck. We've never met before, right? It's almost like this. Yeah, I mean, I make the choice of vanilla or chocolate, and whatever happens from that choice will set off a chain of events that will lead to more choices, and each choice that I make sets off further choices and more events. And I, as a human, am discovering those as I make those choices. But if you look at time as something that just exists for someone outside of time, all of those choices still add up to my life.
Okay.
Right?
Amazing. In Judaism, in order to define a real free will decision, one has to choose between that which is going to be good for their soul versus that which is going to not be good for their soul. So what you're
Chocolate, good for my soul. Vanilla, boring, bad for my soul.
that in that example, that's not using a real free will decision. A real free will decision, according to Rabbi Teller, who was a great rabbi, and he talked.
So you're saying that the decision between, sorry to interrupt, the decision between choosing two ice creams is not an important enough decision that it matters whether or not it's free will?
Correct. So
Interesting.
I'm going to share with you that
Rabbi Teller.
we, even before I get to the real free will, Rabbi Teller, is that we believe in Judaism that we are a soul and that we are also a body.
Mm-hmm.
We believe that the soul, your internal, wants to always have good. Your soul wants to get up early in the morning. Your soul wants to do the right thing.
Assuming that getting up early in the morning is good.
let's assume that your soul wants to connect to deeper, meaningful things. Your body wants hedonism, wants laziness, wants fast cars, wants everything which is comfortable.
So your body is like the animal, your soul is the spiritual.
Correct.
Right?
We, as humans...
Where does food fall into that? Because your body needs food,
amazing.
your soul...
Now I like where we're going now.
Okay.
So this is where we're going.
Okay.
Is that there's the animalistic side to who you are.
Right.
And there's the horse. And then there is the rider. And we believe that the rider...
Is the soul.
Riding
the horse.
Riding the horse. Now your horse...
Would you say then that soul
we have
is
to
consciousness as well? Or would you
Correct.
not? Okay.
Correct. So your soul is consciousness. Our body, the horse, if not tamed properly, would just ride off into the clouds, into the distance, and the horse needs to be, with reins, needs to be tamed. So, every time that I choose to not elevate my soul, listen to my soul, become more spiritually enlightened at that moment, I'm choosing to allow my body, my horse, to shadow over my soul. Because at that moment, the soul wants, not the soul, the body wants to feel the pleasure, wants to feel the comfort, wants to not put in the work.
Does that mean that the soul doesn't care about pleasure?
Soul does care about pleasure wholeheartedly, but how?
But only in the way that like enhances the soul, right? So if the soul is after a deeper, more meaningful experiences, then that means that any pleasure that the soul derives isn't it's kind of like simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. Sugar is a simple carb.
It's a simple
something
carb.
that really feeds
it's quicker. It's quicker. To attain
something
more,
to feed your soul is a complex, meaningful pleasure.
It requires more work.
Right. So there's
more time, more work.
When you give tzedakah, that's a pleasure, but it's a deep, meaningful pleasure, right? That fulfills your soul's want for pleasure, whereas eating ice cream is more of a body pleasure.
Correct.
Okay.
And maybe this is a good time to talk about this before we get back into this. There are 5 levels of pleasure. Oh. And this was taken from my teacher named Rav Noach Weinberg, who started Esha Torah.
Okay.
And he derived this from the great sages, that there are 5 levels of pleasure.
Levels. So
levels of pleasure.
Level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Level 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's like a food pyramid.
Think of the Maslow's hierarchy or a food pyramid.
Of needs.
So the lowest level of pleasure is the easiest to attain, but also diminishes very quickly. Right. So you can get it quicker, but it also goes away very quicker. So the lowest level of pleasure is physical pleasure.
Something that just makes you feel good.
Food, sleep, sex.
Yeah.
And I need to feed myself those physical pleasures all the time in order for survival.
Okay.
And by the way, the higher we get on the pyramid, you will not inherently trade a higher level on the pyramid from a lower level.
As in you can't...
Meaning once somebody is actually tasted or experienced a higher pleasure, quote unquote, they wouldn't trade that higher level pleasure for a lower level pleasure. And I'll give you an example.
Right. Given the opportunity to trade, sometimes you don't have access to higher level pleasures, right?
Correct. So, for instance, the next level of pleasure, stage 4, is love. There's physical, and then there's love. So many of us are spending our entire lives.
We would choose love over food.
Correct.
For example.
So here would be an example. Let's say I came into contact with a billionaire, billionaire, uber billionaire. And he didn't have any children, God forbid.
Mm-hmm.
And he met...
I love that. This completely hypothetical billionaire, you're still so concerned about this hypothetical billionaire.
Guy.
Hypothetically, I hope he still has children.
I hope he still has children in the hypothetical.
That's so funny.
He
You're such a sweet guy.
Listen, God forbid.
You invented a person, and then you're like, oh man, this person I just invented, I got to make sure that he's got some kids.
Because we need him to experience higher level pleasure.
I know, I love that. That's so sweet.
So what ends up happening is that you have kids.
Yeah.
And this billionaire meets your child one day, and he doesn't have kids. And he says, you know what? This is going to be a weird example. You know what? You're awesome, Rabbi T's kid. You're awesome. You're fantastic. You know what? I've always wanted a child. I want to tell your dad how much of an incredible kid you really are. So this billionaire, hypothetical billionaire, comes up to me and says, hey, Rabbi T, you know what? You and your wife did such an amazing job with your kid.
I want to buy him.
I'm going to buy him.
Okay.
I'm going to give you $100 million
for your kid.
And here's the thing. That will solve all my issues, my problems. But here's the thing. I'm going to give you $100 million, but you're never going to be able to see your kid again.
I mean, is this kid good in school? Is he? How fast is this kid? I'm just trying to understand the value of this child.
So most healthy people at that point will hopefully do the right thing
and sell the kid. Right, of course.
You're ruining my example, Greg.
Okay.
Hopefully, the healthy parent will obviously not sell their kid for any amount of money because they've experienced love.
Right.
Higher than love. You're saying, what could be higher than love?
What could be higher than love? There's 3 things higher than love.
What could be higher than love?
You're about to blow my mind.
Number 3.
Self-actualization.
Meaning.
Hey, jinx, you owe me a soda.
Personal jinx. Meaning.
Meaning.
We're all looking for meaning in life. And people are finding meaning, are trying to find meaning in every aspect.
Wait a minute. But does that mean that if you were to offer me meaning, I could give you a child for it?
That means, no, but here's the example that you might see is that.
I think I understand.
So a perfect example, and again, this is not political.
Also, I think people find meaning in their children. So
yes, that's true, but we'll just transcend that for a second. Is that where do we see that where meaning could potentially
be more than love?
You'll see it in Israel where a lot of mothers and parents are willing to say, hey, kids, yeah, you can go fight in the Israeli army and the IDF and risk your life. And I might not be able to see you ever again. But you know what? The meaning of living in the state of Israel and fighting for your country and fighting for something bigger than yourself, mothers and fathers are willing to allow their kids to go off and fight. They could theoretically move out of the land of Israel and be somewhere else where that's not required, but they're willing to fight for something more meaningful.
I mean, I think, yes, I agree. And that meaning is something that cultural from that parent. I think another version of that example would be, we've discussed this before, is relationships or divorce. Sometimes people are willing to give up, and I guess it's debatable whether or not the love is really there if you're willing to go through a divorce or a breakup. But sometimes people find some sort of meaning in life that isn't congruent with the relationship that they're currently in, right? And they choose meaning over the relationship because the relationship doesn't fit with that. And so they're choosing meaning over love. I think, I'm sure you could argue that point.
We could. This is all arguable or debatable.
It's all a discussion.
Higher than meaning. What could be higher than meaning?
Spirituality.
You're almost there. Power and creativity are higher than meaning.
Wow.
Power and creativity.
How are those in the same place, though? Power and creativity are such different ideas.
The power of creating. We'll call it that.
Okay.
The power of creating. Now.
Creating.
Let me give some examples.
Hit me with it.
Hit you with it. You can donate money to a cause that you really, really is meaningful to you.
Meaning?
But what about the person who created the cause? He or she is the person who started the 501c3 because something happened in their life where a kid had special needs and then decided to come up with a special needs 501c3 nonprofit organization because
that feels less about creating though, and that feels more about a sustainability of meaning. You know what I mean? Like I'm kind of saying like, yeah, I agree with that, but I think that falls more into
that's
like
one example, but I do
right.
want to say another example of creating humans. When I'm a parent,
a child,
I am creating another living being. So that is the ultimate sign of creativity. And I'm going to preempt what number one is. The highest level is to have a relationship with God and to be godlike itself. That's the highest level of pleasure. So how does 2 and 1 go hand in hand? When I create something, I am being godlike because God created us unconditionally. And when I also create something, I'm quote unquote using the same traits that God did when he created us.
I'm also noticing a bit of like a waterfall effect on that too, because it's almost like being godlike inspires creativity, because if there's, that's what separates humans from animals, right?
Higher levels of consciousness.
Is the ability to create something that doesn't exist. AI is incredibly smart, but it's still not human.
It's not human.
It doesn't have the ability to create a whole new thing that has never been thought. It is only derivative of what other people have done.
And why, and us as human beings, this idea we've talked about in previous classes is that God is this infinite being. You can't do this to God. You can't touch God. God is not finite. God is beyond time and space.
God is an idea almost.
But we are supposed to be godlike. So how could we as finite beings who are tangible, who are physical, be godlike, which is inherently intangible?
To create.
When we create, we are
because that's
mimicking.
The one thing that God does that is kind of unique to God. And if you fall under the framework of God created the world, that's the ultimate form of creation. So everything that gets created from the world that God created is created with God's tools, God's image, whatever you want to say.
And this is known as the 5 levels of pleasure, is that many people might have only tasted physical pleasure in this world, and they keep on having to get more and more and more, jump out of a plane, go on roller coasters, do drugs, and try to have this experience of feeling alive. They can be billionaires, and they could be depressed. Well, why is that?
It seems like that hierarchy is built on sustainability.
It's built on sustainability. You build on something that is greater than yourself.
What pleasure will stay with you the longest? Because
it also takes the longest and it's the hardest to create,
right.
That to have a real connection with God, to really truly try to create something from nothing. That is, we're trying to do that, to have that in our
right.
lives. And once somebody experiences that, and once somebody feels that and has true attaining of that, they're not going to trade that for anything. And once they can have that taste of it, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm now starting to live. I'm now starting to experience life. Something is greater than the here and the now, than the tangible, than just my body and my bodily urges, that I need to just go have fun in the club and I was going to say, or just snort coke or whatever it is it no, like we're trying to aspire to connect to something that's beyond the here and the now, that's beyond just my body, that I'm just a body that requires intake.
I mean, it sounds like this hierarchy is based on this concept of fulfillment almost, because the most fulfillment, the most long-lasting fulfillment is in creating something that sticks around, right? I mean, a closeness with God is at the top because that it feels fulfilling to connect to a higher power, because suddenly problems of the earthly environment feel less important when you've connected to a power that is beyond time, space,
that's doing teshuva.
emotion,
That's going
right?
back to
Returning
your source.
to the source. So there's God, right? Then below that, something still incredibly fulfilling, but not as fulfilling as that, because once you've attained that connection with God, that's got to be an ultimate sense of like, wow, I've really opened my mind to a new level of consciousness. But creating something, that's why your example earlier of donating versus creating a nonprofit, it's much more fulfilling to create a nonprofit because it's something, it's almost like it's based in a legacy in a way, right? Because
it's something that's going to be here.
it's going to be here whether or not
My
I'm
children
here.
are going to be here.
I've done something.
Correct.
And then,
I'm
meaning.
contributing to the world.
Right.
The same way that God
In the same way
put
that meaning
us
is
into the
there
world.
too,
Correct.
right? Is that meaning is something that fulfills you for longer than love, because meaning is something that even after love can come and go. I mean, we all know that time heals wounds and time heals love. Even the worst breakup after a certain amount of time is okay. Your brain learns how to move forward. Grief is a good example of that. Someone you really care about passes away. Over time, you find a way to reconnect with yourself and find happiness again, no matter how difficult that was. That's that meaning, still higher, more fulfilling than love, which is beautiful, but can go away. Meaning doesn't really go away, neither does creating something or your connection with God. But at the very bottom of that pyramid, the pizza I'm going to eat at midnight, that's going to go away by 12:05. I eat very quickly.
You have great metabolism.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I work out.
I'm trying to be a good judge of character. But here's the thing: is that can the pizza that you're eating? There's also a mindset when you're eating the pizza. Is the pizza going? Is it just I'm a body that when I eat the pizza, is the end all to feed my body, or is the end all I'm eating the pizza so I can elevate my soul? So I can get closer to God.
There's some food that's really transformational.
Are you eating
Rabichka.
to live, or are you living to eat? Are you eating to live or living to eat? And a lot of people are living to eat because it ends with your body. But if you're eating to live,
but food can be a very transcendent
it is,
experience,
but it can fuel me so I can do more mitzvot, more opportunities to connect, to do really meaningful things. If I can take the fuel to then give tzedakah, or help the old lady cross the street,
right.
or be...
That almost alludes to the idea that some pleasure is just a way to give you a boost on your journey to find higher versions of pleasure. Because I don't like the idea. I don't like the idea that places bodily pleasure at the very bottom as almost as if it's something we don't need. I think we do need bodily pleasure. I think it's in moderation. Right. It's good to enjoy a pizza or ice cream.
Good sushi.
Or even,
I had some great
obviously
omakase.
not drugs, because drugs are bad.
Well, yeah, it's counterfeit.
But even partying or sex or anything like that, those are okay things. In fact, procreation is pleasurable at two different levels for a reason.
Good. Now, they both happen. Now, I didn't say this as part of the 5 levels of pleasure. Is there's a real pleasure, and then there's a counterfeit pleasure.
Okay.
So, if food turns into gluttony,
that's counterfeit.
If love turns into lust, that's counterfeit. So it happens to be that sex feels the same way.
Right.
Both.
But there's a reason evolutionarily it feels good, because it is good for evolution for us to want to have it.
Yes, because otherwise we wouldn't be
kids,
here. Yeah. So when one has sex, are they doing it for their animalistic needs, or are they doing it to create another human being?
Or to even foster connection.
Correct.
Right? Because it doesn't
real
have
connection.
To,
real
it
connection
doesn't have to just be to make a child.
Correct.
I think in a modern sense, I think that there is nothing wrong with seeking low level amounts of pleasure, like bodily pleasure, in the form of food or music or concerts or fun, even though they don't last as long, because we need that. We need that novelty as well. I think that those things get a bad rap, and I think it's important to understand that even that novelty.
Yeah, we're not meant to be Buddhist.
It's hard.
There's nothing wrong with being a Buddhist monk, but we're not.
It's hard to get love, right? It's hard to get meaning. It's hard to create.
We have to channel that in a healthy way.
And each one of the lower levels of pleasure, because they're easier to get, hold you over until you get the big thing.
And hopefully people will come to a point in their life where they truly have been able to experience higher levels of pleasure and attain that, and know that, you know what, at this stage of my life, right now, I'm trying to attain higher levels of pleasure. And that might mean going to a previous class. I might have to work a little bit harder. Right. I might have to take more responsibility. I might have to be more present. I might have to ask the harder questions to say, how am I going to truly achieve, to sustain this grit, this adversity, to be in the moment? Because a lot of the times when people are willing to attain the grit, the adversity, stay in those uncomfortable situations, a lot of the times the higher levels of pleasure will come.
Well, it's like, I'm thinking about it from a perspective of freelance. I do a lot of freelance work, and I'm not always hitting the big gigs, the big bucks, the big clients. And so it's almost like, I have little clients along the way. That's my, cheap pleasure, right? That's my easy pleasure. Right. And then, there's bigger clients and bigger clients, but I need those little wins to get me to those bigger wins.
And hopefully that sustains you enough. Right. That then somebody doesn't give up.
But if I indulge too much in the little wins, I spend all of my time on the little wins
rather than putting the quote unquote bigger wins in your safe deposit box, right. Collect more money, right. And then decide to get the bigger purchase, right. And say, okay, right. I'm now willing to take that jump to truly find something which is really meaningful.
Because
so that goes back to self-awareness.
Is energy, right? Because you only have so much energy in a day.
Time, energy.
To achieve, we're finite beings. We have 120 years. 120 years on this earth.
Moses, our prophet, lived for 120 years. So that's where that comes from.
120 years we have. And you only have so much energy to attain only so much of that pleasure. And it has to be, how are you going to balance your energy so that you don't focus all of it on attaining the little wins, the little pleasures, the bodily pleasures, and you save enough energy to attain some of those bigger pleasures.
And also become discerning enough to say, it's worth my investment to spend maybe a little bit more time rather than getting these quick shots, and spend a little bit more time, be a little bit more patient, be a little bit more wise, mm-hmm. And say, sometimes the most important things in life that are really meaningful, really purposeful, take me sitting still, take me asking questions, take me
listening to this podcast, very important.
Speaking to a rabbi, speaking to a therapist, and say, you know what? I can't always be so impervious, so impulsive, mm-hmm. so quick. And sometimes in life, if I just sat back, listened, waited, then
you're saving your energy.
I'm saving my energy, and the true bigger ticket things in life will come. And that's ultimately what people want in their lives, but they're not willing to endure, again, the time, effort, pain that comes. So they're saying, I'm just going to keep on doing these quick bing, 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 this fifth level pleasure. And they think that that's going to hold them over. It's not.
Mm-mm. You have to sit and gather that energy. I always think about, there was, it's so funny. You've seen Star Wars. Yeah. Episode 1, when Qui-Gon Jinn is fighting Darth Maul, I think. And there was that moment where they're fighting and it's like a long fight with the lightsabers and stuff. And then there's that moment where like the laser door comes up and they're on either sides of the door, and Darth Maul is like pacing back and forth, and Qui-Gon Jinn just sits down and he's completely still and he's just waiting for the door to open. And I remember as a kid, I'm like, what are you doing? You get up, you got to fight. But now as an adult, recognizing that I have a limitation of energy, what he's doing in that
Zen.
moment is he is sitting and he's gathering his energy because he knows that in a minute that door is going to open and he's going to need all of the energy he has to defeat this opponent.
Excellent metaphor. Excellent.
Right? So he sits down to calm himself, gather himself, to prepare himself for the next chapter of that fight.
Amazing. So to take this
Be
idea...
Qui-Gon Jinn.
Be Qui-Gon Jinn. To use now these metaphors of pleasure to go back to our original question, when is somebody really using...
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a rabbi you were going to tell me about.
Where is this? I needed to deviate.
We'll get
We're
there.
coming back.
We'll get there.
Going back to Rabbi Teller, when
yeah.
is somebody really using their free will? Free will requires when somebody is able to choose their soul over choosing
their body
or that quick, immediate gratification, hit of pleasure. So we needed to talk about pleasure first.
Okay.
So the example that Rabbi Teller uses, he says in his book, there's a guy who's been smoking cigarettes for the last 25 years.
Cool. Okay.
He's been smoking cigarettes for the last 25 years.
What a cool guy, this guy.
He is about to cough up his lung.
That's cool.
He's on the verge of emphysema.
Even less cooler.
And he knows in the heart of hearts that the smoking is killing him every day.
Mm-hmm.
But he is so addicted that his body needs it so badly that he says to himself the night before, I'm quitting. I'm done. The next morning he wakes up and his body is fiending. His body is saying, I need the cigarette. I need the nicotine right here, right now. And then he forgets everything that he said to himself the night before. And now he's faced with a real free will decision at that moment and say, life or death. I choose to live, or my soul is telling me I need to live another day so I can connect to my source, connect to my ultimate being, or I'm choosing to say, forget my soul, forget the deeper purpose, forget the deeper meaning.
I just want to look cool.
And I need the cigarette now.
Mm-hmm.
And that, according to Teller, is using real free will at that moment. Not whether I'm going to have vanilla or chocolate, because neither one is really, truly inconsequential. But when it comes to having that cigarette at that moment, am I choosing to do what's good for me, or am I choosing to be disconnected? And that is real free will. And we, in life, God gives us free will decisions that we aren't aware that there are real free will decisions.
I was just about to say.
Because we've become so blinded and so immune to what am I willing to live for and what am I willing to die for, that they don't even know that at that moment that is your opportunity. That moment is your opportunity to truly connect to God and truly be on a heightened situation and truly live, which could really at that moment, if you made the right decision, would be your level 1 pleasure. And people at that moment are saying, I can't do it.
But I want to challenge this idea because let's go back to the ice cream. Seems very inconsequential. But let me frame it in a different situation. I have a bowl of vanilla ice cream. I have a bowl of chocolate ice cream. You're offering me, which one do you choose? And I choose vanilla. And you say, okay, you can have the vanilla. And then let's say a young lady walks by, sees me eating the vanilla ice cream, and she's like, oh my goodness, that's my favorite flavor too. I'm just as boring as you. And then now we're having a conversation, and now I've met this young woman. Let's say that vanilla
she now becomes
ice
your
cream,
wife.
She now becomes my wife because she stopped, and she only stopped because I chose the vanilla ice cream and I didn't choose the chocolate. Had I chosen the chocolate, she maybe would have just kept going like, oh, he's a chocolate guy. He's not a vanilla guy. Or she might have said,
I can't believe
you
like
chocolate, gross, and
gross.
She's not interested.
And then you know what? She could have become your wife with that too.
She could. You're right. So, but I'm just curious because you never know I definitely understand the concept of a life and death. I'm going to smoke this cigarette and die of emphysema. Of course, that's free will. That's a really major decision that one can make that 100% alters the course of their life, whatever. But what about these little decisions that blow up to be bigger decisions? Here's another example. Let's get away from the ice cream. Let's say I am walking down the street and I notice a quarter on the ground. And I think to myself, that's just a quarter. I don't need that. It's not going to help me. I'm going to keep walking straight, right? Or the other decision is I'm going to bend down and pick up this quarter. It's really not anything, but I'm going to bend down and pick it up. And let's say the time it took for me to bend down and pick up that quarter is exactly the amount of time I needed to not get hit by a car that goes careening through a stop sign literally up the block. And so now this very inconsequential decision that feels like it has nothing to do with either bodily pleasure or spiritual pleasure has incredibly altered the course of my life and potentially destiny.
Okay. And then we get into the topic of why do bad things happen to good people? And then we get into the topic of, okay, God forbid there's cancer in this world. And, the guy who has been smoking their entire life, could live to 103 and not get any form of sickness.
And someone else.
And then somebody else who
has a pack of cigarettes one time or something.
Or has never smoked a day in their life.
Gets cancer anyway.
And gets cancer anyways, and then they die. So if we want to
Because there's chaos.
Because there's chaos. And then the question is we go back and say, what is God trying to talk to me and tell me right now? And then that comes into, at that moment, God is trying to say something to me. And as we said in episode number 1, what is prayer? Then we come into this idea of prayer, and that at that moment, I'm meant to now have a dialogue with God and be like, you know what? Seemingly, I am a good person. Seemingly, I seem to be doing everything properly, and God decided to give person A cancer. What is God trying to say? That was my destiny? Seems like a pretty messed up situation. Or we can say, going back to last episode, is that God wants us to learn something. God wants me to grow from something. God wants me to use my free will at that moment and decide to connect to him differently, where maybe I was blinded to something that I wasn't aware, that my soul was sleeping in some area. And that now, in the 6 months that this guy has cancer, he has now finally started to live a life of true meaning, true purpose, true creativity that he was never able to do before. And then it woke up everybody else in his life to say, okay, you know what? Destiny or not, I can't control it. And you know what? He wants me to pray. By me praying and talking to God, that's helping me elevate and helping me be more conscious on my day-to-day life now, that before I wasn't ever doing anything like that. Not to give an excuse that creating sickness is going to create more connection, but
I also, by the way, think that the idea of looking at destiny versus free will on a person-by-person basis is just, it's flawed inherently, because we aren't isolated in this world. Everyone is making decisions all the time, every moment, every second of everything. And so because we are so interconnected, and your life is weaving with my life, and the people outside of this door are weaving in as well, and we might be recording this episode while an ambulance drives by because someone else is in trouble, all of these things filter into the decisions that we all make. And so I think it's narrow-minded to look at destiny as an isolated thing for each individual person. And instead, we have to look at destiny as a construct of life and humanity for this whole planet. We are all, while we are all the main characters of our movie, the Earth is one big living thing that houses all of us. And we all, when you expand your vision,
people,
exactly
in the same light that I have to figure out what my purpose is as Rabbi Teller.
And something that you do within your life could significantly impact. Maybe someone listens to this episode and makes a decision based on what we say that changes their whole life. And maybe that was the whole purpose.
We had an effect on a community,
a
or
bigger
the
thing,
bigger
right?
Jewish people, and that's how we have to look at it.
And we didn't even know that. And maybe that's the purpose of what we were supposed to do on this earth. Maybe right now we just fulfilled it. We'll never know. Right? But the fact that every day you and I wake up and think, what can we do today to inject some goodness into this world? How can we...
And to be more connected and try to...
derive a higher level of pleasure.
And we're trying to, going back to the levels of pleasure, not to say this, but look...
Me eating a tasty snack doesn't help anyone else, doesn't impact anyone else happen.
But us creating Show and Teller, we're being creative.
Right.
And that's second level pleasure. And
right.
Not to say we're being godlike by creating...
that's third level. No, fourth level pleasure. Creative.
Fifth is physical.
Oh, right. Second. Sorry. I was thinking...
Second from the top.
Second from the top, yeah.
And we're trying to infuse meaning, purpose, and pleasure because we are mimicking God.
We are changing the world.
Yes.
One episode at a time.
And scene.
That's it. Actually, I think a great place to end. I think that's really interesting. I mean, I definitely want to revisit this idea.
We will. I think there's a lot more to this.
Well, yeah, because there's faith as well. Because
right. We haven't spoken about
that you're
faith
going in the right direction
and exactly.
And communication and the people involved in your
correct.
destiny and how your destiny affects others. It's another episode.
Stay tuned.
Thank you so much.
Have a good day, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.